Oh, all right. Let's talk about that lesson. How did you think it went?
So I think it went well in terms of the assessments that I gave. I think it allowed me to fully see what the students that were understanding the time, how to tell time, and students that I needed to work additionally with.
Let's backtrack a little bit though to the beginning of the lesson. Tell me more about how you decided to start your math block, your math time.
So I started with just basically like telling the students, we're going to review time. Our next part of the unit was data. So, or like bar graphs and
Mm-hmm.
pictographs and stuff. So,
Yep.
I started kind of just saying we're going to review time so we can move on. But I want to see, who really understands time, who can show me that they understand time. So, kind of started. We're gonna have a little more fun with it today, and do a little more like group work and like games type activities.
But even before that, didn't you do like a little pre-assessment, like a little review
Oh,
quiz?
so
And tell me more about that. That was that very, very first, like getting your math block started.
okay, yes. So we started with like a pre-assessment, and on that pre-assessment were questions on addition and subtraction with regrouping, and then it was also so I could kind of see, do they remember addition and subtraction? How much do I
Mm-hmm.
really need to review before they go to third grade? And then it had some questions on time, or had
Mm-hmm.
question on time, and then it had a question on data,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we'll do next. So I can start to see who already has it or
Mm-hmm.
who am I going to have to work more with.
Yeah, I saw that had there was mixed skills on that assessment, but it was still brief and short.
Right.
So it was really quick, real more of a formative kind of type assessment that had mixed skills on it. And then you did have that data question on there that gave you that pre-assessment knowledge too. So let's talk more about you gave the kids some time to complete the assessment, and then what did you do?
And then after they took the assessment, which it was short, I gave them like 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wanted to see, what do they know, right? Right off the top of their heads.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, we graded it as a class. So we went over it and graded it as a class. So it gave them immediate. They knew immediately if they missed it, and what the answer was immediately. And then when I collected them, I had them write the numbers that they missed on the top left-hand corner, so I could see if there was any trends and numbers missed, so I knew what needed to be worked on.
Okay, that was
Further.
really good. That's why I liked how you quickly and that was so important. I think it's very powerful when kids can self-assess and figure out what part of this do I really not understand. When Miss Lawley's teaching me how to regroup, am I messing up my tens column? Am I messing up adding? What am I doing wrong? And I think when a kid gets a chance to actually grade their own work, it's very powerful for them to figure out where their mistake was made, to have them correct the mistake so they can see it. I think you're right. I think when we correct their mistakes for them all the time on paper, that doesn't really do a lot for them. I don't think they learn from that mistake because they didn't correct it, because they didn't grade it, they didn't fix the mistake. I think it's way more powerful, number one, when you have a student fix their own mistakes because it's them figuring out what they did wrong, them doing the work too. And it also is good for the brain. The brain, when you can connect fixing a mistake with doing it physically, that also helps retain for knowledge. So I think that was a really good move for you to have them correct their own work. That might be something you even try more. And it's kind of double dipping for a teacher because that means I don't have to correct it either. It kind of saves you some time. But it's really important that kids do get that timely feedback. That really, right away I can figure out, oh man, I really don't know time, and we're getting a test on it in 2 days. I better really listen today. Like maybe it would provide that purpose for them for engagement even more. So I thought that was really good that was a good way to start it. And then always, if you can get a little pre-assessment data on something you're about to teach, it does help you figure out where you need to start and figuring out those gaps right away. So you can pre-plan on what your students would need. So tell me more. So we did that was that first kind of assessment. Now, then what happened?
So then, after that, we just reviewed a little bit as a class. Just reviewed how to tell time, the steps of telling time, vocabulary, time, vocabulary, and reviewed all that as a class. And then after that, we broke up and we went, because we reviewed on the carpet, and then we went back to our tables and broke into our groups and played a game as a class. And anytime, especially with the class I have, and this might be with any class, but I know especially this class, anytime they can compete against each other, it becomes more of a game than a learning experience. So we played a game, and I would write, I had a clock on the board, and they had to tell me the time back on their whiteboards. But as a table, I let them pick who would be their captain, their spokesperson, and then as a table, they had to figure out the answer together and then hold up their boards. And then the first table that had the correct time on their board up first would get a point. And then the table that had the most, we went up to 5 points. Then that group got a table, because we do table points, so they got a point added to their actual table points for the classroom.
Right. That's a good one.
So, but I did not just have one person answer and stop. I made sure everybody answered so I could visually see who had it and who was struggling.
So tell me, why do you think that was an effective way for your students to review time? What do you think about that strategy really was effective?
Well, they're engaged. So anytime you can do something like that especially with this class, they become engaged. It's not about learning anymore. It's about we're having fun learning, and they completely separate it. They don't think they're learning.
So that's an interesting statement. A lesson to you that the more that you can incorporate that kind of learning to your kids, because it is learning, but it's just learning in a way that's not you read and I answer a question. It's that cooperative learning. It's that if you do well, I do well idea. Yes, they think they're playing a game, and I would call those things games, but we know they're learning at the same time. Yeah. So maybe for you, to really reflect back on that and what your class was like when you were teaching with that style, what your students were like, what were your answers like, what was the discussion like in the classroom. So I think when you provide those opportunities for them, that it's exciting for you as a teacher to see them excited about what you're doing and not falling asleep at the desk. So just think about how you can continue that teaching every day within what you're doing.
You make me think of a good point too. So, I have my class set up like Kagan. So I have the high, medium, low.
You have the leveled seating. Yep.
So that low is also learning, because as a group they're trying to come up with the answer together. So that helps. And I noticed, I have one group that they're pretty much all lower, because I just
you only have so many highs, you only have so many seats,
and they were struggling, but there was no one to kind of help pick them up. So they're I think it brings up a good point, especially for next year, really thinking about how my tables are set up.
I was going to say, tell me what your takeaway was from that when you saw that, and that exactly how important it is to really try to space out those highs and lows and medium highs. And one thing, when you are doing those group works, you might just want to make sure, because one thing you want to make sure is everybody's participating. So even if you're just repeating what somebody said, everybody has to say a time. Even if you just repeat what the first person said, everybody in the group should be speaking. Because I don't know if sometimes there's those kids that want to they'll shout out the answer in 2 seconds. Nobody got a chance to even think what the time was. And of course, they probably did know it right away. So instead of them thinking, they just took. So you might even make it like, I'm going to write the time. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think in your mind before you discuss as a team.
Oh, that's good.
Now, I want the number 2s to begin, and they're going to say the time. The number 3 will say the time. The number 4 will say the time. Number 1 will say the time. And if we're all in consensus, we write the time.
That's a good idea.
If I want to say, I disagree with you, because if you can see, the small hand's really closer to, and they can kind of justify their thinking a little bit more. And again, you have to worry about the kids who they have something to say, because they can just repeat. And I would say that if you have nothing to say, you can repeat what someone at your group said, but really think. Because I want you saying something's better than nothing. Something's better than I don't know. So you can kind of manage that to kind of make sure everybody has an equal opportunity. Because that's kind of the scary part of cooperative learning is making sure you don't have the kid who does nothing and the kid who does everything, for the team. Oh, we know Dianara is the smart one. Okay, what do you think, Dianara? Oh, is it C? Okay, we all think C. So just kind of making sure to try, because it's going to happen. How can I ensure that each of my students is going to be accountable to have an answer and to speak to this team? Okay. So just thinking of those little ways and just little things like that. Like, I'm going to give you 30 seconds of think time, not a word, no groups. You actually combined a structure. It's called Numbered Heads Together. It's very like what you're doing. And that's what the team has to do. They have to come to a consensus on their answer, but they each have to provide justification for their answers. I think it's 3:15 because if you see, so you can go those sentence stems, you can go really deep with that sometimes. Okay. But I thought that was great that you did. That's the only little pitfall that's to think about. Making sure nobody's just not having to do some work, Yeah,
and I think that's a good idea. I like that, how each person would have to answer so you don't have slackers.
You're just not waiting for, I know she's going to get it, so I'll just be quiet and wait till she says it, and then I don't have to do anything. Yeah. Or the kid who's really shy and isn't talking, and so we're just going to reinforce them not talking because they'll talk for me kind of idea. So it's kind of forces that, and it's in a safe environment. It's in a team of 4, they're not having to be in front of the whole class, so they I think it's a great way to have kids participate and not feel intimidated. It kind of gives them that safe place to take a risk or be wrong, and then I have 3 people who are going to help me be right, So that was really good. You went into that was a really nice way for them to review time, for you to see where your kids were at. And I saw you adjust your instruction when you saw that they were having a little bit of trouble with a couple of the times. You repeated that type of problem to see if they could get it. Yep. So you really adjusted your instruction when you were looking at what they were doing. So let's talk more after that.
And then after that, we just did an exit ticket quiz type thing, all just on time. They did it obviously independently. It was timed 5 minutes. I collected those and then graded them and passed them back the next day, so they could see right away how they did on their quiz.
And that's so important. That timely feedback is huge for kids. They want to know. If you ever, I can offer you a suggestion. If you know have those antsy kids, you can collect those papers and then put the answers right on the board right away.
Oh, that's a good
So
idea.
They can see, I did it. Oh man. It's kind of funny to see their reactions too. Mm-hmm. But you could, just put your dot cam up and then just write the times in so they can say, okay, these are the answers, but I'll be going back to correct them. But you could show them really quick too, just to give them that immediate feedback so they can kind of, again, self-assess. How did I do it? I'm not going to wait for Miss Lawley to tell me how I did. I'm going to go, oh, I got this. Or, oh man, I am in trouble. I think it's an important skill, a life skill for us to figure out where are we at in achieving what we want to do. And I think sometimes a lot of our students just wait for us to tell them how they're doing, and they need to figure it out. Because we ask them to tell us, what don't you understand? Well, if they can't tell us that, we can't do our job. So it's really important for them to learn how to figure out what don't I understand, because I don't get it. That's not it. Yeah. What part, So I think you're really growing that mindset for them to be able to self-assess, figure out what I need, figure out what I got, and figure out what I need to pay attention to. So I think that's a really good thing. Okay. The other thing that I thought was nice as well you did a couple different types of assessment. It wasn't just paper and pencil for the kids. You started with a really quick review. Then you went into the whiteboards, which is a type of formative assessment. It's really quick. Do my kids get it or do they not? And then you went into that independent assessment of the lesson itself. So it kind of gave a couple different modalities for them to show you their learning too, which I thought was really a good idea. You did a very nice job, Ms. Lawley. Now I know some assessments can be a little more difficult because we don't do those as often. Mm-hmm. Tell me your thoughts on formative versus summative. How do you feel about those?
Well, I feel, formative is just more of a quick check. Are they really getting it? Do they just understand it in sections? And then summative, did they understand the whole picture? Do they remember it? So, because sometimes formative, it's right away. So it's that short-term memory. And summative, because I know these kids aren't going home. They're not studying. They're not preparing for this summative assessment.
Mhm.
So did it stick in their long-term memory?
Where's that retention aspect of what you're teaching?
Mhm.
So what do you think is the important part of giving formative assessments? Like as a teacher, what do you use those for?
I use them for just, are they understanding what I'm teaching in that moment? Are they memorizing it, or are they actually learning the concept of it?
So when you find that your students really aren't doing so well in that formative assessment, what would be your next move?
I would reteach. So, and something that like I'm really trying to do is not just go, 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 to really stop and just reteach it and reteach it a different way, maybe, to have it actually stick. If it's more the whole class, if it's minimal, like just a few students, I'll pull them to the side and do more one-on-one teaching with them. So more just like tutoring type stuff.
Yes, the more one-on-one, giving them what they need at their level. Okay, that's why I was curious, because those formative assessments can drive that instruction. They tell us what we're doing maybe in the next 5 minutes or what we're doing for the next week. So that's, I agree with you that formative just is something you need to do daily. And short is great. I'm a big fan of just short. Like, do we know or do we not? And if not, we move. We'll keep doing another one. So not dragging out 15 questions on the same time. You might do 4 or 5. They either have it or they don't. Yep. And I think that's what you've noticed as well. Good job. Awesome.
All right.